Though I think I'm gonna take a break from Fallout content for a little while. I love this franchise and I want to return to it soon, but I've been focusing on it for far too long and I want to prevent myself from getting any franchise fatigue.
So that was a f***ing lie.
The year is 1997. I am a sperm. Meanwhile, somewhere in Irvine, California, a small development team at Interplay Entertainment is cooking up something special. Their newest project is called Fallout, and although the team knows that what they have on their hands is quality, they have absolutely no idea of the legacy that they're about to create. Nearly 30 years later, I am no longer a sperm, and Fallout is a cultural phenomenon with numerous games of various quality, as well as a successful TV show on Amazon Prime with many fans eagerly awaiting the much anticipated Season 2. I've been able to enjoy most of the Bethesda-era Fallout games, so much so in fact that I'm actually really tired of playing them, but I've grown to love this franchise so much that I still can't pull myself away from it. This left me in a little conundrum because I'm bored of Fallout, but I kinda wanna keep playing Fallout. The answer to this problem actually ended up being really simple, because there is a whole other side to this franchise that I have yet to experience, i.e. the Interplay era. All it would take is a good amount of patience and the willingness to try something new, and once I gave Fallout 1 a good, honest try, I got fucking hooked. Straight up, it still manages to be one of the best in franchise despite how old it is. This game is very much a product of its time, which is what makes a lot of people turn their nose up to it. But fortunately, I've come to find that Fallout 1 surprisingly holds up in most ways. The main aspect of this game's design that is easily the biggest barrier of entry for many that try to play it, including a cobbler, is its turn-based isometric gameplay.
Look, gang, a door.
I wonder where it leads.
We'll never know.
From the perspective of someone who struggled to play these games in the past, the gameplay was very daunting and was without a doubt the part of the game that I knew was going to either make or break the experience for me, but I am incredibly surprised that I've ended up loving it as much as I do. I am very much used to the FPS gameplay from the rest of the series, but what I find so enjoyable about Fallout 1's gameplay is that it's basically a point-and-click adventure. When you're exploring the world space, you just click around and your character will move to wherever you tell him to go and engage with what or whomever you want him to interact with. I do find it really funny that your character and companions will zigzag back and forth when running in certain directions. This is definitely a sign of the era that this game came out in that looks super goofy now, but I can't help but find it charming. Also, in an interesting workaround for not being an open world, in between major locations, you traverse a massive world map, and it's only when you get a random encounter that you are dropped back into regular gameplay. I would always rather be able to explore the wasteland in person, but in 1997, it may not have been possible to make a world as vast as this map and have it actually feel large, so I'm still appreciative of how they handled the map exploration. It really puts into perspective not only how large the wasteland is, but just how desolate it is too, because there is a calendar at the top of the map that shows you how you'll travel for days on end before you reach another major location or even come across anything at all. What I find the most familiar is that the gameplay still adheres to a lot of the same rules as other titles from the series, like having to worry about carry weight, and you will find yourself looting things all the time.
We are same, but different. But still same.
In this game, looting involves a lot of dragging and dropping with the mouse and does admittedly get a little tedious from time to time, but it's not all that big of a deal. Most of the time you spend playing the game, you'll be using a single hand to operate the mouse, and only every now and then do you have to actually touch your keyboard to save or type something out. Like I said earlier, it plays like a point-and-click adventure, right down to the constant examining of NPCs and objects so you can tell what you're looking at, as well as damn near every piece of information the game can possibly give you being in a text box at the bottom of the screen.
Pay attention to me!
Combat in Fallout 1 is where the gameplay itself seems to get a little bit complicated, but in all honesty, once you figure out how everything works, it becomes a lot less intimidating. Basically, it goes like this. Imagine how VATS works in Fallout 3 and New Vegas, but that's how combat is the entire time, and then make it turn-based. Every time you shoot your opponent, they get a chance to shoot back at you, and that goes for literally everyone else engaged in battle with you, friend or foe. At times, you might be engaged in a battle with up to 15 combatants, all of which will take a turn turn or sometimes 2 after yours, so you're going to want to turn up the combat speed in the settings. Otherwise, you're going to be sitting there for quite a while until you're either killed or you come out of the fight on top. Although all combat is dependent on your action points and largely works like today's version of VATS, VATS itself is still a separate combat mechanic that works just like it does in more modern titles, but has more target options that they should absolutely bring back in Fallout 5. What took quite a bit of getting used to for me is that literally everything, even things that normally wouldn't, in combat cost action points.
What? Bro, what are you talking about, man?
Moving just a few steps away from your current position, now you can't shoot. Need to reload your weapon? That's some of your AP gone. Opening your inventory? AP. About to die and you need to use a stim pack to heal up? Better hope you still have some AP left over, otherwise you're waiting till your next turn hoping someone doesn't shoot your ass into the Shadow Realm. Some of these things seemed like intrusive design decisions to me at first, but over time they became standard, and once I learned the rhythm of how combat is supposed to go, they transformed into a really interesting way to force you to make every action count. The thing that felt most familiar in terms of the combat is that it is completely based on both your statistics and RNG. It reminds me a lot of RuneScape, because the amount of damage you do to your enemies, as well as if you even hit them at all, is random, but the better your stats, the higher the chance that you're not only going to hit, but hit hard. This made progressing through the game feel really satisfying, because at the beginning, your gear is terrible, and you're going to feel like you're missing a lot of your shots, or only doing a little bit of damage, but as you become more experienced, your gear gets better, and your killing potential goes up significantly. When it comes to how the character progression goes, I love the hell out of the fact that it hasn't changed all that much over the decades, because even more recognizable things are here. You can level up to a max of 21, many of the different skills and perks we know and love from future games are here, and there's also optional traits, which are a neat way to give your character bonuses with an added negative trade-off effect. I like the idea of traits, but considering how much of this game I had to learn by going in blind, having even more things counting against me from the very beginning was a no-go this time around. I did not want to make this game even more challenging than it was already going to be, and in hindsight, I think I made the right move. Of course, you also have the iconic special stats that operate very similarly to how they do in more modern Fallout games, aside from the fact that they seem like they're actually 20 times more important than they have ever been, because for the first time in any game out of this series that I have played, I ended up playing a character with absolutely atrocious stats. In the character creation screen, there are a few pre-made Vault Dwellers to choose from, and I heard that the third one, Albert Cole, is considered to be the canonical protagonist of Fallout 1, so I was just like, fuck it, I'll play him.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Well, that turned out to be a massive little brain play, because while he is very useful in situations where a silver tongue was necessary, once I got to like level 8 or so, I was losing just about every battle I found myself in because his agility is so low, which means less action points. I could barely do any damage to anything, so I would die more often than not, and I had to see the most brutal game over screen that I think I have ever seen in a video game time and time again.
Not even the Carrion Eaters are interested in your radiated corpse.
On today's episode of How Fucked Up Is Fucked Up, that's fucked up.
Eventually, I decided to just restart from the beginning with a custom build that was much more focused on agility, because in Fallout 1, the higher it is, the more AP you have, so it seems like there isn't any reason to do any kind of build without having maxed out the stat. Once I restarted though, I noticed an immediate difference in how the game was going for me once I had 10 agility, and I had a lot more fun with the combat going forward. Regardless, it is very important to keep in mind that it does not matter how good your stats are if you do not quick save or rotate saves often enough. Fallout 1 comes from a long time before the invention of autosave, so if you aren't saving enough or at all, you can potentially lose your entire save or many hours of your save if you die. Sometimes you might even soft lock yourself into a situation that you weren't prepared for, like when I went to a location called The Glow without enough Radaway or Rad-X, and I was so irradiated after a few minutes that I would die every time I tried to leave the area.
Your bones.
Luckily, I had a save from like an hour before, so the consequences weren't too dire, but you can bet your ass I was still annoyed by it. Nobody likes doing shit twice on account of their own dumbassery. At one point, I had to download a cheat program to prevent myself from being set back 3+ hours because I snuck past some of the game's most difficult enemies and couldn't make it back without catching their attention and getting absolutely demolished.
Damn, nigga, what you doing out here with all this ass? Double cheeked up on a Thursday afternoon.
In regards to the whole of Fallout 1's gameplay, I still find it very enjoyable despite it being an absolute dinosaur of a video game. For a long time, it was a deterrent for me, but now my perspective has most definitely shifted to understanding that its gameplay is actually one of its greatest strengths. It's also just different, and I like that. It's a little complex, but it's not too hard to learn if you give it the time, and once you do, the rest of the game just clicks. In basically like no time at all, you go from trying to learn a game that seems like it might be too old to enjoy, to just being immersed in yet another Fallout game. And speaking of immersion, holy shit, this game is immersive. I understand how hearing those words might make you question how a game that looks as pixelated as this could be immersive, and I wouldn't blame you for doing so, but I'm just gonna need you to hear me out on this one. One of the most essential ways that this game holds up is how it presents its setting and atmosphere. The setting here hits a little bit differently for me because it is set in my home of Southern California, only 84 years after atomic fire sent humanity back to the Stone Age. And for those of you who are not new here, you already know I'm about to whip out the O word. There are multiple things that play into making the both of them feel very oppressive. And the first one that felt like a slap in the face before I even watched the opening cutscene is the soundtrack. I typically don't bring up the soundtrack of whatever game I'm reviewing to save on time because there's usually other things that I feel are more important to discuss, but in Fallout 1's case, I'd be doing the game a huge disservice by not doing so. Before I even started the game, I was checking out the settings to see what I could tweak, and a track called Desert Winds was playing in the background, and that shit sent shivers down my spine. That background audio is fucking is pretty terrifying.
I'm so fucking scared right now, you shut up!
This game has some of the creepiest music I have ever heard, and the only game I can think of that was able to make me feel uneasy in the main menu of all things is Call of Duty World at War. Music can be such an effective tool to convey to the player how they should be feeling, and this game does it so well that simply adjusting my settings had me wondering what I was about to be getting myself into. After I began playing, one of the first things I noticed is just how quiet this game is. I don't know if it's just that sound design didn't exist back in 1997, but I'm pretty sure the only time you can hear anything other than the game's music is when you're either in combat or talking to specific NPCs. When you're traveling around the map though, damn, is it effective. The aforementioned main menu track, Desert Winds, is actually a very common track that you'll hear when you're out in the wasteland, and it sounds a lot like how the song is named, but what makes it sound so haunting is that the howling winds somewhat seem to resemble the wails of souls that were lost in the war. It invokes a strong feeling of death that makes the world feel more dangerous to exist in and serves as a reminder of the tragedy that befell the world nearly a century ago. Another track that really stood out to me is The City of the Dead, and it plays when you reach Necropolis, aka the City of Ghouls. The music is very clearly trying to communicate to you that it is not safe here and that anything bad can happen at any moment. It's actually the perfect song for an entire city full of ghouls because this is the first time they were ever introduced in Fallout, and the track is so loud and eerie sounding that upon hearing it for the first time, your guard will be up pretty damn quick. There is one track that I think is meant to convey how your character is feeling because when you're inside Vault 13 somewhere around the middle of the story, you hear a track called Vault of the Future. The music makes you feel on edge because your character has had a lot of time to adapt to the outside world and having to constantly look over his shoulder. Even in his own vault, he doesn't feel at home, and it just goes to show how much the Vault Dweller has changed since he left Vault 13 at the start of the game. One more track I wanted to highlight, called Vats of Goo, is heard in both the intro and closer to the end of the game, but when you do hear it, it does a phenomenal job at raising the tension as you step into something that is totally unknown to you. It gives you that feeling that there are threats all around and feels like it's not a matter of if you'll come across something nasty, but when. And what exactly that thing will be is most definitely waiting for you to find out. The entire soundtrack works really well, but I chose these ones because these are my favorite examples of how the OST carries a lot of Fallout 1's atmosphere and makes the weight of the world you inhabit 10 times heavier. Accompanying the OST in making this game feel as oppressive as it does is the art style, and I know that Fallout 1 isn't the most beautiful game out there, obviously, but if you can look past the pixels, what lies beneath is some really great world and enemy design. I am big on my Fallout wastelands looking as dead and dull as a world can possibly be, and this game technically set the franchise standard for that, because the entire map is literally one big ass desert. 99% of the game is just brown. There's very little color, and what color there is strategically placed to draw your eye to it. There is very little plant life other than some crops in certain settlements, and to say that they're thriving is an exaggeration at times. Settlements themselves are often struggling and or dealing with their own unique problems, and I love the detail that the structures people live in or work out of are either made of junk or some empty husk of a building they took over. In many of the city locations, the buildings have been pretty much leveled, and you can see that the quote-unquote rooftops that most of these buildings have are just the floor of a second level that no longer exists. These little details show you that those who do survive in this nightmare of a world are living quite a rough existence and are only just getting things back together again after the bombs dropped. This region, even after all these years, is still very much dead, but despite how harsh the wasteland is, there's still a little bit of humanity left trying to pick up the pieces.
I gotta tell you, it was perfect. Perfect. Everything, down to the last minute details.
There's just something that I find so cool about how the original game in a now great franchise set the standard for how the wasteland should look in future entries. And to double down on that, many of Fallout's most iconic enemies are here with flawless design as well. The ghouls are a longtime favorite of mine, and they certainly look and act so much like zombies on account of their rotting green skin and exposed muscle tissue that the very first time I arrived in Necropolis,
I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
straight up, I cleared the damn streets of these guys because I took one good look at them and thought they were feral. I came to the unfortunate realization not long after that I had participated in ghoul racism, because all those zombies I gunned down a few blocks over weren't feral. They were just ghouls having a little block party.
Listen, we fucked up.
Their visual designs are perfect for the time, and I think I reacted to them like how the devs anticipated their players would, so it's no wonder that ghouls became as iconic as they are. Right alongside the ghouls, we have the fearsome Deathclaw, and if any of you out there thought that New Vegas's Deathclaws are terrifying, think again, because the ones present here are a hell of a lot worse. Oh shit! We're getting the fuck out of here, bro. Oh my god! I nearly shat myself upon seeing these guys for the first time, and they look very similar to how they do in 3 and New Vegas with their huge horns, sharp teeth, and claws, but it feels like they are significantly more difficult to kill in Fallout 1. It also helps their scare factor that they are built up to be a mythical creature, and people get fearful when talking about whether or not they actually exist, because most people who have seen them didn't survive to tell anyone about it. Deathclaws really are the top dogs of the wasteland, and their reputation precedes them, as they have clearly remained at the top of the food chain since they were introduced. On a less iconic side of things, we have a creature that I've never seen before called the Floater, which reminds me a lot of the cacodemons from Doom, mainly because they both float and have a huge mouth with sharp teeth and a big eyeball. Floaters are an interesting creature, but I don't find them to be very intimidating. I know this may offend some of the OGs out there, but come on, they literally let out a fart when they attack you. I do like them, but at the same time, I'm not really surprised why they haven't shown back up in Bethesda-era Fallout. They add more variety, which is always great, but they just feel like an extra enemy type.
Shut your lame ass up, man.
There is another abomination that is kind of like a sibling to the Floater that is also one of my favorite creatures in any Fallout game, and it's known as the Centaur. The Centaur is very similar in design to how we know them today, aside from the fact that they look even more freakish, because here they have 2 heads, one of a human and the other a dog. They feel about as threatening as the Floaters do, but I am definitely biased in that I still like them a hell of a lot more. The way their visual representation shows you 2 entities that are nothing alike somehow somehow fused together like some horrifying science experiment gone wrong is obviously what made them a desirable enemy to have in future games.
Yep, it's a pretty fucked up looking dog.
Both the floaters and the centaurs function as a sort of follower or canine companion to the big baddies of the game, also known as the super mutants. Super mutants over the years have sort of been Bethesda washed in that they are present in literally every game post Fallout 3, which over time turned them into a rather generic enemy type, but the overall vibe surrounding them in this game couldn't be more different. They have one thing in common with the centaurs in that they look a lot like how they appear in the rest of the series, aside from a few small differences, but they are so threatening here. Even near the end of the game, when I was level 13 with energy weapons and power armor, there were a number of occasions where they shot through my armor in a single turn, literally blowing me to bits from full health. Damn! Holy shit! Fuck. There's always a chance, no matter how powerful you are, that they're gonna turn your ass into buttered toast. Narrative-wise, what makes them stand out in Fallout 1 is that they play a huge part in the main storyline. We'll get into all that shortly, but goddamn do you feel weak compared to these guys whenever you do come across them. All of these aspects, the music, the aesthetic designs, and the enemies themselves, when bundled all together, do wonders for making the SoCal wasteland feel like it has a real heavy weight to it that is placed on your shoulders.
That's a 10.
Now, if the stories that this game tells were not well written or interesting enough, it would take that feeling away. But like so many other things that Fallout 1 accomplishes, it also set the standard for the quality of the side quests and main storyline. The one thing that players trying to get into these games need to understand about questing is that it does not hold your hand at all like modern games do. The only way that it helps you at all is when characters will nonchalantly mention a useful piece of information. So you need to be paying attention at all times to what the NPCs you talk to are saying. At the start of every single quest you get, you're given your objective, and then beyond that, the general attitude the developers were going for is figure it the fuck out. Not having my hand held like a little baby was admittedly something that I wasn't looking forward to, but I ended up finding it enjoyable because it feels nice when you accomplish your goals on your own fruition simply by making your brain work a little bit harder. There are a few side quests in this game that don't require much brain power at all though, like when you make it to the town of Shady Sands for the first time and their leader Aradesh tells you about their rad scorpion problems. After offering to help the town, you head to a cave where the rad scorpions are coming from and exterminate them. In Old Town, in the hub, you can meet a small band of thieves that operate like a sort of Robin Hood gang, and Loxley, one of their members, will give you the task of stealing a valuable necklace from a local politician for them to sell. Also in the hub, some random guy named Irwin that is living there tells you that his homestead was overrun by raiders and offers to pay you to go reclaim it for him. These are just a few of the more simple side quests in Fallout 1, and it does not require a single lick of thought to complete any of them. But you see, I'm smooth-brained, so I still love shit like this. I have always been a believer that just because a quest is simple, that doesn't make it bad, because mindless things can still be fun, especially if they offer great rewards like that last one that I mentioned. There are a great number of side quests that are the exact opposite of that, and this is where this game's side stories really shine. One of my favorite quests in the whole game is found shortly after you leave Shady Sands in a place called Junktown, and when you arrive there and head to the general store, you can meet a man named Killian who serves as the sheriff and mayor of the town. When you're mid-conversation with the dude, a man walks into the store, starts shouting about some guy named Gizmo, and tries to assassinate Killian. If you defend Killian, he'll thank you, and he informs you that Gizmo is basically the town's casino owner and crime boss. And while everyone in the store just saw this dude proclaim his intentions were on his behalf, he wants hard physical evidence that he can show the rest of the town when they make a move on Gizmo's operation. After handing you a wire, you can go speak to Gizmo and pass a speech check to offer your services. If you pass, he'll entertain the idea, and you can ask him why he wants Killian dead, to which he'll basically just say he wants him out of the way so that way he can control the town. After handing the evidence over to Killian, he invites you to assist in bringing the hammer down, and there's no way anyone is ever going to say no to that, so after a gunfight, Gizmo ends up with a huge hole in his chest and you get yourself a nice early game pistol. It's definitely your run-of-the-mill good over evil story, but something Fallout 1 does that I loved from New Vegas is that some quests have ending slides that you were shown at the end of the game that tell you what the consequences of your actions are. We will talk about them more later, but for this quest, it turns out that this story has trade-offs because siding with Killian allows Junktown to maintain the status quo, while siding with Gizmo allows the town to thrive and become a booming economy, but only under someone who is nothing more than a tyrant. I still think Killian is best for Junktown, but the game actually gives you reasons to think that maybe Gizmo could be better, especially if you want to get rich yourself. Earlier when I said that not holding your hand was a good thing for the experience, there were a couple times in my playthrough where I found that wasn't the case, and the first occurrence happened while I was in Junktown. A second quest that Killian can give you is to deal with the gang that rests not far from the general store in the town, and he doesn't tell you how to deal with them. He just says to deal with them, which might make you think he wants you to just wipe them out. At least that seemed like the most obvious option to me. Well, I didn't want to do that, and I could not for the life of me figure out how to take this gang down without doing that, so I looked it up. Turns out that in order to handle them without bloodshed, you have to speak to a woman by the door, not just once, but twice, because the second time you talk to her, a little bit later, you can convince her that she's young enough to still have her whole life ahead of her and that she shouldn't waste it being in some stupid gang. After 24 hours, you can find her in a different room in the building, and then you can convince her to testify against the gang. If you succeed again, you can then report that you have a witness to the gang's crimes, and then the quest is over. The game tells you none of this. You were just expected to figure out that you need to keep speaking to the same person multiple times with time passed in between to finish the quest. I can only think of one other moment where I ran into the same problem, so it didn't happen often, but I don't think it's fair to expect players to figure out all these steps without any guidance whatsoever. So while I do like that Interplay doesn't hold your hand, there are definitely cracks in their figure it out mentality. Probably my all-time favorite side story in Fallout 1 is found in a location known as the Boneyard, and it involves a group of enforcers called the Regulators and a gang called the Blades. When you arrive, the town is split up into multiple sections. You've got Adytum to the south, which is so fortified it's basically a fortress, and everyone inside seems to be very well armed. To the north, there's the warehouse that looks a lot more dilapidated in contrast, and to the west is downtown, where a faction called the Followers of the Apocalypse resides. When you arrive in Adytum, people you speak to will point you in the direction of the mayor, a guy named Zimmerman, and when you speak to him, he's all worked up. He asks if you've ever dealt with gangs before, which by this point it's likely that you have, and he tells you how ruthless of a gang the Blades are. He says they sneak into Adytum at night to kill the innocent and kidnap children, and he claims that not long before you arrived, one of them tried to run through the gate with explosives strapped to his chest. You can ask him if he saw any of this with his own eyes, to which he says that he only saw the body afterwards, and he's never actually seen any of the activities he's talking about. He also claims that they murdered his son Josh, which is why he offers to pay you 2,000 caps to kill their leader, but things may not be exactly what they seem. After accepting the job and traveling north, you come across the Blades hideout, and immediately something is off.
These just look like poor people.
In a room off to the right side of the building is a woman who is described as a beautiful woman with a sad look in her eyes. You can ask her if she's the leader, and she says yes, but that they're not a gang, and it doesn't really look like she's lying. She asks you what you need, and if you tell her that Zimmerman sent you to get revenge for killing Josh, she freaks out and proposes a different point of view. She claims that the Regulators are actually the bad guys, and are not only the ones with the true power in Adytum, but that they are also responsible for killing Zimmerman's boy. She not only knew Josh, but she also sheltered him with the Blades because his life was in danger for knowing the truth about the Regulators, and she has evidence to prove that she isn't guilty. She hands over a recording of a radio transmission between Regulators where his abductors were obstructed to cut his tongue out so he couldn't scream, and to impale his head on a spike outside of Adytum's walls, then to inform Zimmerman of what the Blades have done.
Not cool, man. Not cool.
The evidence is damning, and the answer is clear. but you can't tell Zimmerman because he goes berserk when he finds out and the regulators will just kill him on the spot. The other option here is that you can assist the Blades in taking the fight to the regulators, but the problem is that they're heavily outgunned. Further north is a faction called the Gunrunners, and they are capable of supplying the weapons that the Blades require, but there's just one huge issue. There is a den of Deathclaws in between them and the Blades, and before they agree to help you, they want it taken care of. God damn, did it take me a while to be strong enough to kill the Deathclaws, but when I finally gunned those assholes down after every time they killed me, I felt like a fucking king.
Finally!
Once the Deathclaws have been dealt with, the Blades get their weapons, and the fight in Adytum was an absolute highlight of my playthrough. I was very surprised to find that this is probably the biggest battle in all of Fallout 1, because most encounters are usually smaller in scale or at least very tight, but when the Blades roll up to Adytum armed to the hilt and armored with some of the best gear in the game, it turns into a full-scale revolt. All of the generic NPCs in this little town join the fight against the regulators in aid of the Blades, and the fight literally stretches across the whole vicinity of the fortress. It was so cool seeing an entire town stand up to their oppressors because of actions that I made to change their circumstances, and once the war was won, they all started saying things like welcome to New Adytum and how they were gonna make this little town what they wanted it to be.
Oh, beautiful.
This quest is among one of the hardest side quests to complete on account of the Deathclaws that you have to kill for the Gunrunners, because without their equipment, I think there's a really good chance that the Blades aren't winning the fight. A big part of what makes this quest my favorite out of all the other side content is that your perspective of the scenario is crafted with information that may very well be false. The mayor is being led to believe one thing, which makes him give this speech about how terrible the Blades are, but upon closer inspection, it turns out that the truth of the matter is totally flipped on its head. Fallout is at its most interesting narrative-wise when things are not always what they seem, and this quest's epic payoff only makes completing it all the more satisfying.
Goddamn right.
It's a real shame that there are no ending slides for this quest, because I would have loved to see what became of the town after the end of the game. In this series, it's very common to get side quests that are a little bit more than side content because of how they tie into the main storyline. When speaking to NPCs around the world, you will hear about missing caravans quite frequently, and there is a quest where you can find out what happened to them. Many people out there that have something to say on this topic have a theory that the mysterious Deathclaw is responsible for the disappearances, but because most people don't survive an encounter with one, nobody can quite say for certain. In the Old Town block, you can meet a man named Harold who looks to be ghoulifying, and he claims to be one of the only 2 people who have seen a Deathclaw and survived. He describes it to you and suggests how you can take one down, and then directs you to a man near the entrance of his house who is basically a loon, but he is the second man who claims to have seen it, and he will lead you to its lair if you ask him to. Sure enough, there it is, deep in the cave, and once you get close enough to it, it moves in for the kill. Once the monster is dead, you can see a dying super mutant laying on the ground that thinks you're one of its own, and in his final moments, he hands over a holotape and he says that he and his team were looking for quote-unquote primes and are based in the Northwest. When you read the logs on the tape, it shows you that they are somewhat organized as they're communicating over radio to their headquarters that they have taken captives a caravan crew of 4 men and 2 women that are to be transported back to base. While it is very short, I enjoy this little side quest quite a bit because it serves as the payoff for all of the buildup that the game has been giving the Deathclaws through dialogue with people around the wasteland, especially if you haven't saved Adytum beforehand. It also does a great job at answering questions that you have about the missing caravans while providing you with new ones that help build up the main plotline, which is what makes it one of the most intriguing quests to me. I have been absolutely glazing the shit out of this game so far, so it should come as no surprise that the main story of Fallout 1 is going to get the exact same treatment. Right at the outset of the main plotline, you were introduced to Vault 13's Overseer, and you were tasked with finding a new water chip for the vault because the one that's been there since the vault was built broke.
You're one ugly motherfucker.
So immediately, the first thing going through your mind is, where am I going to find a water chip? Well, you better figure it the fuck out, and you better do it soon, because the vault is running out of water. For the entire first half of the game, you have a limit of 150 days before Vault 13 is doomed, and trust me, those days tick away a whole hell of a lot faster than you're gonna be prepared for. I would not be surprised if every single person that has ever played this game opened their Pip-Boy at some point during their first playthrough and shit their pants a little bit at seeing how much time has passed without even realizing it. I say that because that's exactly what I did. I gotta say though, I like the time limit mechanic a lot because it adds urgency to the gameplay. You can't just meander around the world doing whatever you want for as much time as you want. You have to pound the pavement and follow the breadcrumbs that will eventually lead you to finding a replacement water chip before you run out of time. The only lead you're given at the start is that there may be one in Vault 15, but if a cobbler brings not only one but 2 ropes to descend deeper inside, you will find that the lowest levels of 15 are inaccessible, so you're basically back to square one.
This feels a lot like hell.
From there, I did a lot more wandering, and it took a few hours of gameplay before I ended up getting my first clue as to where to look for a new water chip while I was in the hub, and even still, I spent a good amount of time there before I moved off to Necropolis, where I heard a replacement could possibly be found. After exploring Necropolis for a while, you learn that there is indeed a water chip right for the taking in Vault 12, which lies under the city, but it isn't as simple as just taking it and bringing it home. Like I said earlier in the video, the ghouls of Necropolis are non-feral, so they still rely on their water chip to get water, and it is here where you are presented with a moral choice. You can just take it and make it their problem, or you can find another solution. This is also where you are likely to encounter the super mutants for the first time, and in the city you can meet a ghoul by the name of Set, who is the tyrannical leader of Necropolis, and he can give you a quest where he asks you to kill the muties and repair their water pump in exchange for the chip, which was a much more appealing option to me. By this point, I was geared up pretty well, but it still ended up being a bit of a challenge, and once I finally got my hands on the water chip without having to leave an entire city to die, it felt really damn rewarding. Set's quest is alright gameplay wise. I mean, I'm always down to chew ass and kick bubblegum, but the real fun comes in how there's some gray area here. Set may lead a violent gang of ghouls, but there is a smaller society of them residing under the city streets that are much more friendly, so taking the chip without helping terrible people leads to the death of innocents. Although the mission has been accomplished, once you make it back to Vault 13 and give the chip to the Overseer, you've saved the vault, but there is still something troubling him.
But at least now it can't get much worse.
But it did get worse.
The report you make raises alarm bells about the super mutants specifically, and he gives you another quest to find out where they're coming from and who, if anyone, might be responsible for creating them. After you save the vault, there is no more time limit, so from here, when you go back out into the wastes, you basically have all the time in the world to do whatever else you find yourself wanting to do. When investigating the missing caravans, I had heard someone mention the Brotherhood of Steel, so that was the next place I found myself heading to in the far west, and after doing a quest for them to prove yourself, you can access their bunker. This is a really great moment in the game if you've played any of the more modern titles, because you get to see how Interplay envisioned the Brotherhood in their first iteration of them, and they are very different from how Bethesda presents them. Rather than being this powerful force and big player in the wasteland, they're basically technology hoarding mole men that live in a hole in the ground. They're way different, but also the same in that they are still a really cool and unique faction because they are unlike anything the wasteland has seen at this point in the timeline. For me personally, it was also a big moment when I got my hands on power armor for the first time after rescuing one of their captured initiates from the hub.
Power armor? Fuck yeah, give me that shit. Yo. Look at me. That feels good. That feels rewarding.
The Brotherhood is actually pretty pivotal to uncovering the truth about the super mutants because Elder Maxon is well aware of the growing issue, but the other elders just think he's losing it. So he asks you to head north where he believes the threat may be coming from. So now we have 2 leads that point us to the northwest, and the further you go in that direction, super mutants and their centaur/floater counterparts become significantly more common. This is because to the northeast rests Mariposa Military Base, and in those walls lies the terrifying truth that all of the missing people are taken here and dipped in giant glowing green vats of an old pre-war military experiment known as the Forced Evolutionary Virus, which then turns them into giant green super soldiers. And the term soldier is a damn good one to use to describe the super mutants, because they're building an army, and it is a highly organized one. The super mutant army is very intimidating, and once you discover the base, you can tell the Brotherhood about it, and you have a chance to convince them to go on the offensive, which I did, but I gotta say, I was very very disappointed by them here. They said they'd follow me to the base, which they did, but because I killed all the mutant guards that were standing watch out front, there was nothing for them to help me with, so I expected them to follow me inside, but they wouldn't do it.
This sucks more than anything that has ever sucked before.
I had to go through all those steps to get the Brotherhood to take the threat seriously, only for them to do nothing about it in the end. They were of literally no help to me at all. I don't know if they didn't follow me in because of design limitations or what have you, but I expected a lot more from the Brotherhood here. Also, the military base is where I had that second occurrence of the game giving me no clue as to how to advance within the base, because there are these security shields that do damage to you when you pass through them, but some of them can't be passed through in general, so you have to find some kind of way to disable them. Well, again, the game doesn't tell you how to do this. You're just expected to figure it out on your own, and the two answers I found were not telegraphed well at all. The first one is that there is a computer terminal on the first floor that you can use a radio on to drop the shields. For one, you can get a radio in this game, and two, you can buy one off of this specific person in Junktown or from a merchant in the hub. Okay, no problem. I didn't know that, so I did that. But I still couldn't do this option because in order to use the computer, I had to have a high enough science skill that I did not have. Option 2 was to use the repair skill on the shield emitter things, which confused me because lockpick is usually used to unlock doors, but I still didn't have a high enough skill for that. So I had to come back a couple hours later after I had leveled up enough to be able to use the skill, and then I was able to access the whole base to destroy it. Again, I understand that this game is old, but I don't get how anyone is supposed to learn that you can do either of these things without looking it up or having someone instruct you. When you destroy the base and the vats of FEV, that takes care of the what. But we still have yet to uncover the why. Why is someone kidnapping people, transforming them into mutants, and trying to build an army? Well, throughout the game, you will occasionally hear the names Children of the Cathedral and the Master, and they don't really come into play until you've met the peace-loving followers of the Apocalypse in the Boneyard. The leader of the organization, Nicole, has a very strong suspicion that there is something evil about the Children and their cathedral to the south, but she doesn't have any proof. She has such a strong distrust of them, in fact, that she is willing to send a squad of followers to the cathedral to help you wipe them out on a whim, which is pretty wild for an organization that is known to preach peaceful resolution to conflict. You know, for a violent faction, they were really fucking quick to send a bunch of armed people. I went with the more subtle route, where you can disguise yourself as one of the Children, and when you infiltrate the cathedral, you can talk to various people, and you learn that they're basically a cult. Specifically, a cult that is loyal to this master, and they intend to go to war against the rest of the wasteland using the mutant military, all the while preaching about unity. After some snooping around, you can find a secret passageway in the basement of the cathedral that leads to a vault. This vault is a bit different to the others that you've more than likely explored around the wasteland, and that as you go deeper and deeper, the walls become increasingly covered in what appears to be flesh when you examine it.
Oh shit, what is that?
The lowest level appears to be the most grotesque, and it is on this level where you come face to face with the main villain and creator of the super mutant army, the Master. The Master feels menacing immediately upon laying eyes on him because what was once a man has mutated and become nigh unrecognizable as a human being. He is just as much human as he is a part of this vault, seemingly having been fused to the overseer chair you find him in, and his voice also represents this very well.
So what shall it be? Do you join the Unity, or do you die here?
Join.
Die!
Join.
Die!
When you first meet him, he demands your surrender and that you give up the location of your vault so that he may turn your people into super mutants to strengthen his army, and you can do as he asks. If you do, you get the bad ending in a cutscene where the mutants invade Vault 13 and they kill a lot of the dwellers in a show of force, including the Overseer, and then the game just ends. But you don't play this game to get the bad ending, so you can discuss with him further about why exactly he's been doing the things he has, and like a well-written villain should, he can make you understand where he's coming from. Humanity destroyed the world, and the stories you've seen over the course of the game only prove that humanity has still not yet learned to stop fighting each other, to stop killing each other. The human race has more than proven itself incapable of setting aside their differences and coming together to survive in this harsh new world, and the Master believes that he is the solution to it all. He wants to turn as many living people as possible in the world into a super mutant, a member of his his manufactured race that he calls the Unity, as well as to lord over and prevent those who remain human from reproducing. He intends to send humanity into true extinction to prevent future war and conflict that is inevitable without his intervention.
He's out of line, but he's right.
While it is easy to see his point of view because he is very much correct, it is still impossible to justify killing innocent people and forcing them to be a part of something that they will most definitely oppose. As is, most of his standing army, or at least what is left of it at this point, is composed of mutated people who very likely never wanted to become a super mutant at all. Standing against the Master is the necessary course of action, and doing so in dialogue forces you into combat with him. But if you ask me, that's the least interesting way to deal with him. One of the things that I love about the Master as a villain is that he can be convinced that his ideology is flawed by proving to him that by doing things his way, he's dooming the world himself. In my travels across the Wasteland Desert, I completely by accident found multiple pieces of evidence that suggest that those infected with the FEV are rendered sterile upon transformation. When you present the Master with this evidence, it takes a few speech checks to convince him, but if you succeed, his entire world gets flipped upside down. He realizes that even though his army of super mutants can still do the deed, there is no possible way for anything to come of it, meaning that every single person he kidnapped and murdered in his effort to establish the Unity has been for nothing. The entirety of his unnaturally manufactured race is doomed to go extinct after this first generation, and his reaction to coming to this realization of how dangerous of a villain he has become in the effort to do what he thought to be right is pretty damn heartbreaking.
I don't think that I can continue to have done the things I have done in the name of progress and healing. It was madness. I can see that now. Madness. Madness? There is no hope. Leave now. Leave while you still have hope.
Following his moment of awakening, he does the only right thing that he believes he can do now. He tells you to leave and blows up the cathedral, taking the children down with him. What I find so fascinating about the Master and taking the route that gets him to kill himself is that when he and the children of the cathedral are gone and the threat of the Unity is taken care of, it doesn't feel like a triumphant victory. If anything, it's pretty fucking sad because all the death and destruction that his army left in its wake was for nothing. No matter what happens, even if the Master were to get the bad ending where you give up your vault, you're dipped in FEV and they take over the world, nobody wins because his cause was rigged from the start. He's such a tragic villain who kinda had the right idea, but his methods are totally unacceptable, and the fact that he can be shown the error of his ways makes him more interesting because he's not just mindlessly evil. After all, he's still a human being himself, even if he has been transformed into something more than that. The depressing stuff does not stop there though, because upon your return to Vault 13, the Overseer meets you outside and prevents you from coming home.
I've made a lot of tough decisions since I took this position, but none of them harder than this one. You saved us, but you'll kill us. I'm sorry. You're a hero, and you have to leave.
What? What the fuck?
The Vault Dweller has seen and done a lot in the Wasteland, and now that the story comes to a close, the Overseer fears that allowing you to enter once again as a hero would jeopardize the future of the Vault you saved, because your actions will inspire others to leave. The last we ever see of the main character, the Vault Dweller, is when he heads back out into the Wasteland with his head held low. This is a very sad and unavoidable ending, but it's fitting for this dark new universe because there is very little that ever works out for people in the Wasteland, and it ends the game with a feeling of uncertainty. Overall, I think the story for Fallout 1 may very well be one of the most well-written that I've ever played. And the way that the Master and the Unity are built up for so long makes the payoff feel so damn good once you figure out what's going on, and are able to finally beat the game once you've taken them down, even though it ends on a very somber note. Before being sent back to the main menu after watching the final cutscene, you are shown those ending slides that I mentioned earlier, and there are a few that I wanted to talk about. The first one that really stood out to me was what became of Shady Sands, because they evolved into the New California Republic, aka the NCR, which is my favorite faction in Fallout New Vegas, so it was really great to hear them get some acknowledgement here and see where they started. Also, despite stopping the Unity, in both the Hub and the Followers of the Apocalypse endings, they're said to have been completely wiped out by the mutants, which I found very confusing because that was never once represented in gameplay. What's odd is that when I looked it up, I read that apparently there are no good endings for either of them, because both of their good endings are glitched and are unobtainable without mods, basically making the ending slide feature feel broken and incomplete. It's a huge bummer because I really like that feature from New Vegas, but in Fallout 1 it doesn't feel like it was done justice. Though this is the first game in the series after all, so I can give it a pass. Other than that, at the end of my playthrough, I was very surprised to see just how well nearly every aspect of this game held up after nearly 30 frickin' years since it came out. Honestly, as much as I want a Bethesda-style 3D remake of this game, I would be totally happy to settle for a remaster. All they'd have to do is sprinkle in some modern visuals, fix the ending slides, and maybe give a few subtle hints in the moments I spoke about before where the game expects you to understand what it never communicated to you in the first place. Other than these small gripes, I feel like I don't really have a whole lot to complain about in regards to Fallout 1, which is unfortunate for me because I'm gonna have to spend more of my money now because I am a freak about owning physical copies of games that I really like. But what do you guys think about Fallout 1? Did I do it justice here, or do you think I'm giving it too much praise? Please feel free to let me know in the comment section down below. I promise I always do my best to read and respond to as many of your comments as I possibly can. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and click that like button and subscribe so that way you could stick around. It is totally free after all. Until next time everyone, as usual, I appreciate every single one of you for taking the time out of your day to give this video a watch. I'm gonna go play Fallout 2 now, and I'll catch you guys later.